It's now time for us to take a look and review the front pages of the newspapers with Dr. Constance Ikoku here with us in the studio. Good morning, Dr. Ikoku.
Good morning, Nkechi. Welcome back the second time.
Thank you.
You run off whenever. I actually envy you. I wish I could get more time
I'm back for real this time.
Okay. Glad to have you back. And good morning, Indy. How are you today?
Good morning to you, Constance.
Okay. To review the papers today with us, we have Igo Akereha. He is a member of the Nigerian Guild of Editors and former editor at Guardian newspaper. I think we don't have him yet. Well, yeah, he'll join us shortly. He will be joining us shortly. Okay, let's begin with this day newspaper. In this day, FG approves implementation of zero-duty VAT exemption on selected food items. New policy takes effect today. This was announced by the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister for the Economy, Mr. Wale Edu. The Nigeria Customs Service also disclosed this. The dates of operation are August 15 to December 31, 2024. This is part of federal government's measure to manage high cost of food items in the country. I mean, the president promised these exemptions as a way of tackling food crisis and addressing food security in the country. The policy is taking effect today. So here we are. How much impact will this have on the food crisis in the country? Indy, what do you think?
Well, one thing, let's commend the government for doing this. That's one. That's on the one hand, to try to stem make food available and help food insecurity. But let's also say, like is he Adewumi now of the AFDB? He said that no nation can import itself out of food. You have to grow your own, grow your food. Is one thing to say. I'm even wondering which foods are we importing.
So let me state them. They are maize, millet, beans, sorghum, husked brown rice, yes.
And all that. Good. Yes. And then the second thing is, I've come to hear or see or read that if your business is not up to 5 years, one thing that government must do here is, this is an emergency. It's not going to be constant. It's just a stopgap. And if it's a stopgap, you should not be found to put clogs. I mean, circumstances that will make it too hard for those who are interested anyway to import these products. If you then put that, you're compounding the issue. So I think they should find a way to get those who are interested, not to place so many hurdles before them. Because you're talking about bringing food, you're talking about cutting down the cost of the products and all that. Most importantly, concentrate, grow your food, make plans to grow the food we must consume here in Nigeria instead of importation.
Well, to your point on placing hurdles for the importation, there are guidelines. And for everything, there should be guidelines. And some of the guidelines are here. It said to participate in this importation, which will have zero duties, a company must be incorporated in Nigeria and must have been operational for 5 years and must have filed annual returns, financial statements, and taxes as well. So they are trying to make sure.
We got while you go. We have Igor Akereha, so you can bring him on in.
Right, Igor. Sorry for that. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I can hear you. Good morning.
Good morning, Igor. Thank you for
coming. Good morning to you.
so early in the morning. Okay, so we're already talking about the story on the front page of this day about the tax, the exemptions, tax duties exemptions for food, selected items for importation by the federal government. It is part of the measures that have been put in place to make sure that they drive down the cost of food and to make sure there is more food available to the populace. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. It's a good step by the federal government. The last End Bad Governance protest, actually the central issues are that of hunger, which of course, pushed many Nigerians on the street. In the first quarter of this year alone, that is between January and June this year, the federal government has spent about 920.4 billion naira on food imports. That is the figures coming out from the National Bureau of Statistics and, of course, even the Nigerian Customs Service. Well, so what does the government do? The government has to take some remedial steps to ensure that at least you bridge the food bracket for the meantime, but that is not a sustainable strategy for the country to import food to feed its over 220 million estimated population. So, but it's a good step that the federal government has taken. Something has to be done. Nigerians are indeed very hungry. The last time, I think 3 days ago, I just took a stroll to the market. You could see some of the prices of some of the basic food items beginning to come down. The mere policy shift on the part of government alone for the hot, because there are also some people, who, of course, middlemen who hoard food, who try to keep the food there and put them in warehouses, hoping that the prices will continue to go up. But the policy pronouncement alone by the federal government will push these individuals to bring out the food to the market. So for me, it is a good step in the right direction. What is left is for effective implementation and monitoring of the food import. Also be sure that the quality of food that is brought in, whether it is tomato, whether it is pastries, fish, meat, and they are good quality. They are not rice or whatever, because we also have people who go to rebag rice in some places. So we need good monitoring to ensure the safety and health of Nigerians.
Well, talking about monitoring, we were discussing that before you joined us. There are guidelines, concerning the companies that will be importing, and also when the food gets here. The federal government wants some processes put in place, or has already put in place processes that have to be followed. So, for instance, it says that at least 75% of the imported items must be sold through recognized commodities exchanges and all transactions and storage recorded. The key is making sure that the food gets to those that need it the most at the affordable prices that have been planned by the government. Nkechi?
I mean, on the surface, this sounds like a win for consumers that are struggling with soaring costs of food. And the angle, two angles, one that India already mentioned and you already mentioned, are those requirements that the companies have to meet. They have to have been operational for at least 5 years, paid their taxes consistently. And now, while this ensures that, okay, serious players are going to be the ones included, it might seem like you have particularly new and maybe perhaps newer businesses that may not be able to meet this criteria. And then the matter of the commodities exchange requirement, at least 75% of the imports must be sold through recognized exchanges. This move stems to increase sort of transparency and accountability, but let's be honest, in Nigeria, where informal markets dominate, how feasible really can this be? And also the policy, as we've seen, is clearly short-term at providing immediate relief, which is good, but we must now ask further, what happens after December 31st?
Well, yes, it is true that some companies may not be able to participate, but this is very temporary. It ends on December 31. So is this really a big deal, Igor?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get that question. Sorry.
So I was saying, Nkechi was talking about how the guidelines may prevent younger companies or newer companies to participate in the importation. And I was saying, well, it's a very short time between today and December 31. So it doesn't matter. There's so many companies in Nigeria that have been in the importation business. So you will be able to find those that have the requirements to meet this immediate need. It's not really a big deal, is it?
Well, it could present some challenge when you try to exclude some new companies by the regulation. But again, if you review the requirement properly, you find that the government is also trying to take some precaution not to give the approval to new companies who do not actually have any track record. I think that has also been a challenge in the country, where if you look at the power sector, what has also bedeviled the power sector. It's individuals who do not have expertise. When President Olusegun Obasanjo was decentralizing or privatizing the power sector, a lot of people came up. Some Nigerians even went abroad, brought in names of companies who have no track record. So I'm sure the government has learned its lesson. It's trying to rely more on companies with track record, individuals with track record, proven record of transparency and some level of accountability. I think that is what is essentially required. Well, for new companies, we also have individuals, people who float or promote such companies. If they are known, if they have a record of pedigree of some level of reliability, trust, honesty, I think that the government can consider that. But there should be no unnecessary waivers on the basis of trying to politicize this process. Once you introduce politics into it or some kind of political patronage of saying, oh, this is an opportunity to reward loyal politicians or loyal individuals, then we are going to also have problems. So I think the government is just trying to be careful here.
Well, we'll see how far this affects the prices of food in the coming months. Let's move on to Punch newspaper. In Punch, food crisis, military deploys troops in northwest, north central farms. Deployment will grant farmers access to their farms, ensure hitch-free planting season, according to Defense Headquarters. The Defense Headquarters said the deployment was to ensure adequate protection of farmers from bandits, terrorists, and other criminal elements. According to this report, over 332 farmers were killed across the country in the first quarter of 2024. That's a staggering number. This marks a significant increase compared to same period last year, when at least 128 farmers lost their lives. Also, farmers in the north paid an estimated sum of 139 million naira to farm levies to bandits who demanded at least 224 million naira between 2020 and 2023. It's obvious farmers have become endangered species in their country. Having to pay 139 million naira in order to stay alive and to access one's farm is unacceptable. So what the DHQ, the Defense Headquarters, is doing is probably necessary, Igor.
This is long overdue. I am of the very strong impression that those who characterize or name these individuals who are killing farmers in our farms as bandits, for me, I disagree. I've always held the opinion, really, looking at what the papers have reported this morning, and that the DHQ now is waking up to try and take on them frontally. It is my view that these individuals are clearly terrorists who are targeting food security, food stability for the most populous black nation on earth, which is Nigeria. Once you are able to deprive a people from feeding themselves, that is insecurity itself. It then throws that country up for anything. It makes that country vulnerable. It makes the country to be susceptible to even internal crisis, as we have seen in the last peaceful protest by the End Bad Governance. It was tagged End Bad Governance because, for me, I think that at the root cause of that protest itself is the attack on farmers in their farms. What the food basket in Nigeria, looking at the northwest, northeast, and north central, particularly Plateau State, Nasarawa, Benue, that's really the food basket of Nigeria. And really these attacks are concentrated in those regions. So who are the individuals behind these attacks on farmers? I think that is one intelligence gathering to really determine what is happening in Nigeria is very important. These are terrorists who possibly are being sponsored to directly attack the food supply chain in Nigeria, such to throw the country to some form of crisis. So it's a good step that the military, the Defense Headquarters, has decided to take on these individuals. These are clearly terrorists, and I think the Ninth Senate passed a law which the former President Muhammadu Buhari signed into law to clearly characterize individuals as terrorists, and they should be dealt with accordingly. There should be no mercy. There should be no space in Nigeria for any individual to occupy and terrorize our farmers. Once the farmers are able to go to the farms, once we're able to, what we really eat in Nigeria, what are the basic consumables? Tomato, pepper, yam, rice, gari, and all of that. Nigerians are not high taste, except for the elites who want to take champagne and all of that. The average Nigerian just want to eat his fish, his chicken, his good meat.
Maybe you that want to take champagne.
So that is it. So I think once this is guaranteed, that is also going to guarantee political stability.
Right. Good initiative by DHQ, everyone says. But there is also a question, how long are they able to sustain this, and how much coverage will this have? Because it's a big country in there.
Yeah,
it is massive.
When you mention coverage, by the way, Kano says it doesn't have the problem because it doesn't have a large forest. But Benue State is saying that no military has been deployed as yet. That even their governor had to go to Asorok to see the president as he was speaking. No military yet has been deployed there. Police says the terrain of Nigeria makes securing the country a kind of challenging, but that's what they are there for. So they should find ways to handle this. Let's also before you come in, let's also mention the fact that governors should be involved because this concerns states. Governors are paid, what do you call it, security vote. They have, so what are they doing with these security votes? And then the indigenes, because like say politics is real. When you come to insecurity, if you don't involve the people of the land, I think you're wasting your time. So the people of the land, and governors particularly, should be involved. And like Igor said, call a spade, not an agricultural instrument. These people should be dealt with as criminals. They have sponsors. They are sponsors. When you begin to, I think an emergency should be declared here in terms of weeding these people out of our system, because it has to do with food insecurity and it has a social impact on the nation as a whole.
Nkechi, let me bring in here. To what they said about governors being involved, we have had reports in the past where governors, especially in the northeast and the northwest, also Zamfara, for instance, that they were involved, but the kind of involvement was to pay off bandits or so-called terrorists or kidnappers in order to secure those farms. So whatever they were doing or have been doing hasn't worked so far. That means you have to tweak it. It is a serious problem.
Definitely, and paying off bandits or terrorists or criminals just is not sustainable. And when you talk about that coverage, that's actually very important. Like Indy mentioned, just the difference between like Kano and Benue State and what they're saying just shows that this one-size-fits-all approach cannot work. That's where you now have to bring in the governors. You have to now bring in also like just the local leaders in those areas that need securing. This initiative comes really at a critical time. It could not have come at a better time. Food inflation soaring, 40.87%, over 332 farmers tragically losing their lives just in the first quarter.
Meanwhile, it was 128, so you can imagine the increase.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that promise of a bumper harvest, however, does not just hinge on having sort of a military's presence. We have to tackle this from the grassroots and ensure that food insecurity is tackled properly from the foundation. Because how sustainable really is this? Right. We're not going to have military presence in every farm
all the time.
All the time. They have their own actually other priorities as well. So we're taking the ones that we don't even have to put them around farms.
And there is no government that can handle multiple challenges on multiple fronts at the same time. It's very difficult. Igor, you had something to say briefly so we can move on to the next story.
Well, just Indy mentioned the involvement of the governors who collect security votes. The point I want to make is we look at the numbers of our security forces. The responsibility to provide internal security lies with the police, but you look at the numbers of the police is quite inadequate. I'm aware, and I know very well, because I've had interfaces with them, the Vigilante Group of Nigeria. They are present in the 774 local governments in the country with the police, the army, the civil defense, and the DSS have trained these individuals. So they have the competence to gather local intelligence and work with, complement the effort of the security forces. So where I think the state governors, as Indy rightly mentioned, they can integrate the members of the vigilante, not the local, this is a registered vigilance platform, which the Inspector General of Police, they know about them. These are individuals that can be incorporated. They are over 1 million in manpower. So if you deploy these individuals to complement the effort of the police, the civil defense, into the farms, Buhari, I remember when terrorists invaded Buhari area, the local commander of the Vigilante Group of Nigeria, supported the army, though he was killed in that operation and some soldiers were killed in Buhari area in the nation's capital. But it helped because they were able to pinpoint the specific location of the terrorists, and then they were taken out eventually by the Brigade of Guards. So the point I'm making is that, see, we need to incorporate the community policing architecture that we ultimately involve the Vigilante Group of Nigeria in all the communities across the country. That will help to stabilize insecurity around the farming areas.
We'll be looking at Vanguard newspaper. In the Vanguard, hurdles ahead of CNG vehicles rollout. This is an investigation from Vanguard. So the federal government's effort at making CNG vehicles popular may not get the needed gravitas after all. It reveals that the local automobile technicians who are supposed to push the rollout know little or nothing about this auto technology. Most technicians claim ignorance of the system. Many do not understand any vehicle not powered by petrol. Well, this is a new territory for the country and for the government. Compressed natural gas vehicles. It is expected that there might be teething problems. That's not to say that the project needs to be abandoned. The issues can be overcome with time. Can they, Eagle?
I agree that the issues can be overcome with time. Nigeria has to be very careful not to just adopt a knee-jerk approach each time the West comes up with their own energy transition program. The CNG and ultimately the EV vehicles, as the electric vehicles, are modern technology-driven automobile system that developing countries are yet to fully understand their workability. So, but what I would think that the federal government should have done before even making a policy statement that CNG buses, where 3,000 of them were going to be introduced for the public transportation system, is to have even sent, using the Association of Mechanics, they have a national association. I would have thought that the government could have worked through the association, send some of them maybe abroad for training to acquaint them with the new technology. So once they return to the country, those ones will become trained trainers. They can then embark on train the trainers program. And that way we'll have a smooth transition into that program. But as it is, it does seem like a knee-jerk approach because we want clean energy. Nigeria has signed all of the protocols about whether the Kyoto Protocol or the COP21, COP20. We sign all of these international protocols without actually preparing very strongly to integrate them at the local level. So the way to go for me is to have adequately trained, equipped our people, the local mechanics across the country with the capacity and capabilities to understand and deal with this new challenge. But it's not too late. It's not too late. We can still do that.
The suggestion is that the federal government can establish centers across the country where this training will occur. And as well, it's an opportunity for these mechanics or technicians to acquire new skills in a world that is changing in terms of energy transition. But Nkechi, you were concurring, you wanted to jump in, take it away.
I think the whole studio really concurs with what Mr. Igbo has said. The knowledge gap when it comes to CNG could significantly stall these rollout of this policy. And you said, yes, the federal government says they can provide centers for training, the training centers should have been available already. You already know that this is one of your plan to transition to CNG. We should have had those training centers already running. And also, this technical know-how is not even just the only thing that Vanguard has found out in their investigation. They also spoke about the cost of converting a vehicle to CNG being another sort of stumbling block at about 1 million naira, I think, per conversion. Many Nigerians are sort of hesitant to make that switch. And then you also have the cultural aspect that they spoke about. They said Nigerians are known for their penchant for loading their vehicles with all sorts of goods, especially during traveling. So the thought of sacrificing that boot space is very important
It
for a
is.
CNG cylinder.
Especially when you have a large family.
Exactly. And so this investigation really went deep to just talk about the issues that may stall this policy implementation. And I think technical know-how really is at the top of that.
Well, there is still space for improvement. Let me bring you into the next story. Shall we look at New Telegraph? In New Telegraph, Finland to FJ were taking action on ECPA's case. According to the Finnish government, it's taking legal action against Simon Ekpa in regard to his secessionist initiatives or activities. Finland's foreign minister made this known in Abuja yesterday. The Finnish courts are handling the case following a report by the Nigerian authorities. I mean, there have been agitations against Simon Ekpa, who sits comfortably in his apartment in Finland and dishes out orders to people living in the southeast region of the country. This is finally some kind of good news for the people that think that he should be reined in, Ndi.
And then what this young man seems to be doing from far away in Finland, and I don't know why we did waste so much time to get to this point where we're asking Finland to step in. And I do not know, for crying out too loud, how Finland tends to rein him in, because he should indeed be reined in. You can't stay in faraway Finland and you're causing problems here in Nigeria, where many people have died concerning a proscribed organization, IPOB.
Well, IPOB has disowned him severally, saying that whatever he's doing, it's not in tandem with their own goals and objectives. So he is out there doing his own thing, and he's very influential.
He is, because some people are buying. I mean, it's just like what you see happening with Elon Musk and the far right, what you see happening with the kind of the things that Trump was spewing out, even that caused the January 6th attack on the seat of power in America. These things are very dangerous. We hope that indeed that Finland, in collaboration with the government of Nigeria, will rein this young man in. He said IPOB has disowned him, fine and interesting, but we hope that he reins him in so that lives will not be lost now and then concerning our youths, because, I mean, they listen to him and they focus on him.
And in regard to the, okay, we're going to break here,
yeah,
okay.
We'll take a break at this juncture, and we'll be back to continue with these stories. Don't go away. All right, glad to have you back. You're still watching A Daybreak. We're reviewing the front pages of the papers, both local and international. I still have Constance here, my colleague Nkechi, and of course, Eo there in the offsite studio.
We do have another story on New Telegraph. It's also in Daily Trust as well. It says 56.9% of under 5 children in Kano stunted. These children are affected by malnutrition. The report says focus should be on prevention of anemia in pregnancy. The Kano state government was asked to intervene, especially as the state has a huge population. Also, recent surveys show that 60.4% of women in the northwest are anemic. Nigeria needs a child nutrition fund, the article says. Malnutrition is a killer. It leads to a lot of problems. Stunted growth, as is being reported, it also weakens the immune system, leads to increased mortality and chronic diseases. This cannot be ignored, Eo.
Well, that report is very correct. The report on the New Telegraph. We have to realize that malnutrition is an offshoot of food insecurity itself. When you don't have enough food to eat as a people, so how do you try to balance your diet? How will your children also have access to quality protein diets. So those are part of the general challenge that the entire country faces, not only in Kano. If you look at the entire northern belt, whether north central, northeast, or northwest, you come across children who apparently very clearly, physically looking at them, you know they are malnourished. If you drive around Abuja here, the nation's capital, we are beginning to see the influx of some of these young boys. I see a whole lot of them, mostly at traffic intersections, at traffic stops. You see them, they come around you with rubber plates asking for food and support. So they are not able to survive in those very harsh environments. So some of them are migrating southwards. That is a very serious challenge. If you look at the cost of one egg now, and one single egg is costing over 200 naira. You know, a crate of egg which is a major source of protein, and of course chicken, fish. I don't know how many Nigerians even have access to fish now. A kilo of fish is very expensive. Chicken that used to be just anybody can go for a chicken. It's now a luxury food item on the table, not to talk of eggs. Milk, which is a source of good nutrition for children, is completely way out of the reach of even the middle class. I doubt how many people in the middle class. There have been arguments that the middle class is no longer existing, that it has been destroyed. So it's either we are just down the wrong or just up there. So these are the challenges. The government has a serious responsibility, and I think the government has taken steps with this policy to import food. We hope that milk will be part of the food import, and those that are be given the licenses or the approvals to import this food should also target milk imports, such that these children can have access to quality protein to overcome that malnutrition challenge.
A survey is carried out across Nigeria. It's certain that the malnutrition problem also occurs in other regions. It may not be in equal measure, but with the food crisis, you would see that it's happening. But a child needs, you know, his or her mental and cognitive abilities to do well in life. So this particular issue or report or survey that has been conducted is something that really needs to be looked into, not only by the federal government, but also the state governments. Everyone should be involved in Nkechi.
Yes, it should definitely not be taken lightly. When I read this report this morning, I was really taken aback. Stunting is not just about height. It's an indication of a much deeper issue. When you talk about chronic malnutrition, we're talking about children who may just never reach their full potential physically or mentally because their bodies didn't get the basic nutrients it needed during those first critical 1,000 days of a child when a child is born. And you have this UNICEF report now highlights that partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, just attempting to combat this crisis. However, only, I think, 5 states, including Kano, states will benefit from this. This is just a drop in the ocean. And so I think the federal government needs to actually take this very seriously. It's also not just about providing supplements. We have to think about changing mindsets, social behavior change. The UNICEF nutrition specialist said this is very critical. We have to move from just simply treating this issue to addressing the root causes: poverty, lack of education, inadequate healthcare. We have to have more affordability, more access to food, more access to just basic necessities that will make our children grow. In a country that prides itself as giant of Africa, it's very alarming that we're still facing sort of something that is very easy to prevent. Very
basic. And when you look at the report, it mentions UNICEF, it also mentions the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation supporting. You cannot leave these things to international organizations. There has to be a role for us as a people.
If you do not start, it's just like education. Education starts from the home. The teachers, when you go to school, they just help you out. If you leave it to the teachers, you waste the life of your kids. That's the truth. Women, the first thing that comes when they're pregnant and when they deliver babies, the first thing that comes out is what you call colostrum, the white, watery substance. That is very, very, very key for the build-up, general constitution of that little child that you give birth to. So if mothers are suffering from anemia over there in the north, it's very dangerous, because then the children you're talking about 5-year-old children, they're not getting what they really do need to grow up mentally, spiritually, psychologically, and otherwise. It's interesting to note that the Kano State will be the first to implement a child nutrition fund in Nigeria. Other states over there should follow suit and begin to really...
Every state, actually.
Yeah, why not? And begin to really, this again calls to the fact that we should grow our own.
Right.
We should treat our own, deal with our own problems, because after all said and done, there are children, and you're talking about the leaders of tomorrow. So if they don't get the necessary things they should have when they're growing, it becomes a whole lot of problem when they grow.
Well, let's look at the international headlines for you this morning. We will begin with Citizen newspaper from South Africa. Parties over for the Zumas. That's a question mark. It's a question. Jacob Zuma's party, MK, is sleeping and now looks more like a family job scheme, in quotes. That's a quote here. Family job scheme. The notion is that MK holds a promise is already dying. The unraveling of MK has begun, and it could end up being one of the smallest parties in the country in the future, experts say. This report seems to suggest that it's nearly the end of the road for former President Jacob Zuma, especially as regards his political platform. It was launched with a bang, and it took away votes from the African National Congress during the last elections. Now it seems to be struggling, and this is not surprising, Igor.
Well, I know that the MK party will fizzle out with time because of the lackluster performance of the incumbent president. That encouraged Jacob Zuma to actually rally his political supporters to fund the MK party. So, but the initial reception, the initial warmth that the MK received from many South Africans, the outcome of the last elections just simply showed that it is still a far cry from where they want to be. And if you look at that against the backdrop of even the tenure of Jacob Zuma himself when he was president, and all of the trials related to corruption trials and all of that. So those were also part of the issues that came up during the election, that this is still not a man that has the right solution to South African problem. If you look at South Africa, what are the issues in South Africa? South Africa is also struggling with rising inflation, currency instability, crime, and of course, underdevelopment in terms of infrastructure. Most South Africans still actually live and sleep in the slums. What is going for South Africans is the leverage, the infrastructure that was built by the white colonialists. Some of them who still remain, who are still South Africans today. Those are the infrastructure. If you look at since Mandela, when Nelson Mandela took power, he was able to introduce some novel ideas about city center development and trying to move development to the rural areas. But with the exit of Mandela after his just a single-term tenure, every other president that came along became mad in one form of corruption and the other. Julius Malema and his party, of course, he's a young man who is able to rally. He's an Africanist who also thinks that Africa should proffer homegrown solutions to their own problems. And Julius Malema's performance in the last election, of course, took the shine off that of the MK party led by Jacob Zuma. So it is a running story, and I'm sure that in the next election we are going to see how things play out in South Africa. But basically, the issues in South Africa still remain unsolved, and the South Africans are yet to find the right candidate who is able to deal with those issues.
Is heading down the drain is that it is run by like a family business. For instance, the party is led by former President Jacob Zuma's daughter, Dudu Zile, and many members are not having it. They think that this will cause the party not to have a broad-based support which they need to grow and become a party that is center, that is mainstream, and that will have a future in the country. So it also speaks to how, you know, some people or some Africans want to run a business like a family project. In many instances, it doesn't work, Nde.
Yeah, you could liken MKC's way to what is happening with the Labour Party here in Nigeria after the last election.
Labour Party?
Yeah,
No, it's
after the last election.
It's different, no.
Let me land. I'll have to land. After the last election, what has become of Labour Party? It's quarrel here and there, one quarrel or the other, one court issue or the other. I'm just trying to say that, yeah, the young shall grow like they say, but the main issue here will be the foundation. What was the original reason for forming this party? I think, and then bringing in Jacob Zuma, I think they just wanted to spite ANC. And for that, the motive is what may make the party, even though the young shall grow, not to stand a test of time. And that's why I was likening it to Labour Party. In terms of the foundation, in terms of who came in terms of what really do you want to achieve, what's your vision, you know, where you're starting from. That's what is happening to MK Party, you know, now. And they may not be able to last, you know, the distance with the way it's going.
Well, I mean, Labour Party has been in existence way for a long time before 2023. They only got very popular because of the candidates. You know, it has more structures than MK, and it's peopled by mostly labor people in Nigeria or workers in Nigeria. So they are a little bit different. But
a Labour Party before
but that's
last
what
elections,
I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's not a family business. Well,
no, not in terms of a family business, of course.
Let me bring you into daily graphic. Let's look at daily graphic. Inflation eases to 20.9% in July. Ghana's annual inflation rate has dropped to its lowest level in 28 months, reaching 20.9% in July and marking the fourth consecutive month of decline. Food inflation in July recorded at 21.5%, while non-food inflation slightly trailed at 20.5%. This trend suggests that inflationary rates are stabilizing. As inflation continues to ease, there is growing speculation that Ghana's central bank may consider lowering interest rates to further stimulate economic activity. High inflation seems to be the trend across the world. Therefore, any easing at all is of tremendous value to the people, because then, you know, you have, you know, higher purchasing power and all the other things that come with it. Nkechi, you were literally
That's
dancing.
true. I mean, cooling inflation is good for Ghana. It's seen that they're having a sort of a glimmer of hope. I think it's been on a 4-month stretch now. The question now is how much of this decline is actually benefiting the average Ghanaian. Sure, you have month-on-month price increase slowing, but with locally produced goods, they're still seeing higher inflation rates than when you look at imports. And so it's sort of clear that the domestic market is still under strain in Ghana. Then when you look at the lower inflation for imported goods, it suggests that when maybe global supply chains are sort of stabilizing, but the local production isn't then quite catching up. And so this discrepancy could indicate or suggest a deeper structural issue within that economy in Ghana. And also the strategy, what's next for Ghana Central Bank? You spoke a little bit about that. With inflation on a downward trend, there's growing speculation that its Apex Bank will consider lowering their interest rates to then boost economic activity. Since inflation sort of now looks like it's being tamed, no need to keep increasing interest rates. So in Ghana, fighting inflation is actually far from over. The government, the central bank, they need to tread carefully, balancing that need to stimulate their growth with the reality of the economy that everyone still sees, or the citizens still say it's fragile. Also, we have to keep at the back of our mind, they have an election coming up in December. Yeah, cooling inflation seems really good for the country.
I mean, lower interest rates, it's always good news when inflation is on a downward trend, because now there can be affordable borrowing.
Yes.
I mean, if you even look at the front page of This Day Today, there was a story on Manufacturers Association of Nigeria saying or lamenting that the cost of borrowing by commercial banks has moved up to 35%. So every manufacturer, anybody in the industry is always looking at the cost of getting loans or accessing loans from the banks. So this is a bit of a good news. But like you said, Nkechi, you will have to watch whether this trend continues, because it has to be over a long period of time before things really stabilize. Igor, I want to bring you in here. Any thoughts on this?
Well, if you look at what is the cost of inflation in most African countries, particularly in relation to Nigeria, with regards to Nigeria and Ghana, basically it is low productivity. The last election, Mr. Peter Obi talked about moving from consumption to production. If you are not producing enough and then you rely so much on imported items, and then you have your local currency having to purchase those imported items, of course you are going to have a rise in inflation. So most African countries are not, particularly the West African sub-region, we are not producing enough. We have growing population that has to depend on, that will have to eat, that will have to survive, and Nigeria now is importing food. As you import food, is going to place a heavy pressure on your local currency, which is the naira, and then that when you have more money purchasing fewer goods, then of course that is going to lead to price increase and of course consequential inflation increase. So these are the challenges. Ghana, Nigeria, many West African countries need to focus more on developing capacity for internal production, so that we will be able to stay competitive as countries, as independent countries. There's no way you can retain security of your sovereignty when you depend on other countries for your food supply. Look at Ukraine, that is even at war. When Russia bombed silos in Ukraine, you saw most African countries began to shiver. We were going hungry because of grains that were not coming from Ukraine. So how long do you sustain such dependency on international food, foreign food imports? Those are red flags for me, and which every government has to really look at and deal with.
Let's see Daily Express from the UK. In Daily Express, it's cruel to rob pensioners of winter fuel payments. Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, has been told she must make a U-turn on her cruel, in brackets, decision to rob nearly 10 million pensioners of winter fuel payment. This came after inflation rose for the first time this year, and pressure is put on household budgets, with energy bills predicted to rise by £155 annually. People say this is out of the blue decision by Reeves, and she must be put to a stop. Rachel Reeves has been on the chopping block since she announced this decision a few weeks ago. The criticisms are not letting up, but it doesn't show, or she doesn't show any sign that she's letting up on this. She is trying to balance the budget. She is trying to cut costs. They promised to cut costs. That's what Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, one of his promises during the elections. So now they have to find where to take the money from, and pensioners are saying, not from us.
I mean, not just pensioners, the MPs and campaigners are crying foul of this. In fact, it says Rachel Reeves' cruel and out of blue decision to rob millions of pensioners. These people are people who have served their nation,
yes, and
they want to be, and particularly at a time that there's so much pressure on families with inflation, tending to rise with recently. So that's why they're crying out, and so it's trying to balance your policies. I mean, it was like what happened in Kenya, the financial bill thing that brought about the riots, and the president had to say, no, we're not going to go on with this, I'm not signing it. That may eventually be what Reeves has to do. Maybe she will have to capitulate because it affects the incomes of pensioners and homes, particularly at this time of pressure.
I mean, she has penciled down £8.1 billion cut for the budget for the next financial year. Well, she'll have to find where to do that, take that from. Let's see Daily Mirror. In Daily Mirror, they just don't care. Online giants promise to protect our kids. They have failed. Social media firms are putting kids at risk by failing to remove dangerous content about self-harm and suicide. The report claims there's Ian Russell, whose daughter Molly killed herself, said, bosses made promises, but there's no evidence anything is changing. And Kechi, very briefly, we're almost out of time. Social media giants are getting huge flack in light of the dangers, especially for children. You look at that photo of this child that killed herself. The internet, the World Wide Web, is a dangerous place for children, and parents also have a responsibility here.
That's what I was about to say. Yes, these platforms or these big companies have the responsibility of what they put out there. However, when it comes to children, parents really need to sort of monitor and guide what their children exposed to when it comes to social media. Social media at this point and age is where literally children learn from. Even in schools, kids as young as 2, they go to school, they have their iPad and phones, and they watch YouTube. Who's checking if there's any child lock, or what's that called, parental guidance on the YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter. It's just a lot of new information that children are assimilating and are taking in. And when they say a child takes things or...
They're very impressionable.
Yeah, exactly. Children are very impressionable. So when they start...
It's like a canvas.
It's like an empty canvas, and you just paint on it. So this story from the Molly Rose Foundation, the latest analysis is nothing short of alarming, really, this morning.
I remember Bill Gates. When I bought phones for my children, I hadn't read that article. Bill Gates, when his kids, even the first was 14, he said, "I'm not giving you a smartphone." Bill Gates said, and I turned to my children, I said, if I had read this story before I bought these phones for you, I would not have bought
These
it.
companies really are more invested in profits.
All right.
So, protecting children.
We're out of time, unfortunately.
Say one thing.
Let me just briefly.
Very briefly.
Let me just chip this in. The social media is an information superhighway. I doubt if any parent, if anybody, even the tech companies themselves, yes, they can introduce certain pullbacks, but it is a superhighway. Nobody builds an obstruction on a superhighway. If you're at work, how do you restrain your child from foreign into sites that that are not healthy for that child?
That's why you have parental
these are very, very. It has its advantages and disadvantages. It's an ongoing conversation. It's an ongoing conversation, and I think it is something that is posing a challenge to the rest of the world.
We'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Constance and Eagle, for being on the program with me and Kechi. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Next, of course, is the morning show. Don't forget that. I am Ndi Amogo.
And I'm Kechi Nana. Good morning.